The moment I boarded the private jet, I was still touched by my stepdaughter's gentle smile as she slipped a folder into my hands. "Just relax, Mom. I'll handle everything at home." But thousands of feet above the ground, I realized the horrifying truth. This luxury getaway was a one-way trip to death. They wanted me gone to seize the entire fortune. What they never understood was this: the woman sitting silently in first class had never been easy prey. I calmly picked up my phone. "Start now." The hunt had officially reversed. "I'm so grateful you're here to get to know each other better. Which country or city are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. Also, please note this story includes fictional elements created for entertainment and educational purposes. While any resemblance to specific names or settings is purely coincidental, the underlying message I'm sharing is intended to be practical and valuable for your own life. Thank you for being part of this journey. I can't wait to see where you all are tuning in from. The morning I almost died began as all my mornings did with the ocean. At 5:45, I awoke without an alarm in the master suite of the Obsidian. After 60 years of life and 40 years of building an empire, my body viewed rest as a negotiation dictated by work. Looking out at the early light over the Bahamas, I thought of Thomas. He had stood at this very window 7 years ago, moved by the sight of our completed home, believing we had built something that would outlast us both. He was right about the outlasting, though he hadn't known how soon us would become only me. I dressed with the precision the day demanded, choosing a navy Savile Row suit, hand-stitched by Edmund. I believed, as he did, that attire is the first argument one makes to the world. A woman who dresses with precision is heard before she speaks. Last I fastened the Patek Philippe, a 10th anniversary gift from Thomas. He had joked that a woman who built rockets deserved a watch that understood precision. I have worn it every day since his death. In the sunroom, I found Victor. He stood by the east window with his coffee radiating a perfected expression of relaxed contentment. He kissed my cheek, smelling of expensive cologne, a sharp contrast to Thomas's scent of cedar and soap. I told him I had slept well enough, though I had actually been awake since 3. I attributed my restlessness to the Zurich trip and the final regulatory approvals for Project 5 K13, a $50 billion endeavor, hanging in the balance. At 6:15, Stella arrived. She carried a leather document folder and wore the earnest, useful expression she had refined over 9 years of living under my roof. Though she was Victor's daughter from a previous relationship, I had loved her as my own blood. I know now the cost of that love. She claimed the documents were routine health confirmation forms for an insurance review from Dr. Holt's office. Surrounded by family, with a car waiting and a massive project looming in Zurich, I failed to read the fine print. I initialized the first 2 pages and signed the third, missing a paragraph, in a font too small for my 15-year-old eyes. I handed the folder back, and Stella hugged me, a familiar, warm embrace, filled with what I thought was mutual love. Victor walked me to the car at 6:30, his hand on my arm. He straightened my lapel with a gesture so familiar it had become invisible. "Come back safe," he said. "I always do," I replied. As the Rezvani pulled away, I spent 4 minutes thinking about Project 5K13. Then I opened the folder Stella had left on the seat. The truth arrived in pieces: a life insurance policy, a beneficiary designation of $5 billion in the event of my death, with Victor and Stella named as joint beneficiaries. There was no mention of my son, Leo. I read it 3 times. As the car moved toward the airfield, the architecture of my reality shifted. My hand moved to my phone. Marcus Webb answered on the second ring. In our 30-year professional intimacy, he had never made me wait. He was 64, unflappable, and one of the few people I trusted entirely. I told him to pull my life insurance file with Continental Assurance Group. A pause followed 3 or 4 seconds. Marcus never paused without reason. He asked where I was. I told him I was 12 minutes from the airfield. As he searched, I watched the Bahamian landscape pass by. This road was one Thomas loved for its beauty, but I hadn't driven it slowly in years. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had tightened. He asked when I had signed the document. I explained it was that morning presented by Stella as health forms for Dr. Raymond Holt. Marcus's voice turned flat at the mention of Holt. He delivered the news with the slow precision of a legal deposition. The document was not a health form. It was an application filed 6 weeks ago through a subsidiary called Vance Meridian Holdings. It was a $5 billion policy naming Victor and Stella as beneficiaries excluding Leo. Though the contents were fraudulent, my signature was valid. Then came the revelation that struck deepest. Vance Meridian was a shell company, controlled by Julian Vance. This was no hasty plan. It required coordination with a complicit physician and an insider who knew my habits and signature. Someone in my household had designed this. I thought of Stella's hug and Victor's hand on my lapel. The airfield appeared with Ether One gleaming in the sun. I saw Diana Cole at the top of the air stairs, her smile perfect. I gave Marcus 3 tasks: challenge the policy, investigate Vance Meridian, and dig into Dr. Holt's finances and connections. Finally, I told him to verify that Leo's position in my estate and the Atheris charter remained intact. Marcus paused longer this time. He told me there was something else, something he had found in the estate files that explained why this was happening, but he refused to discuss it on an open line. He asked how certain I was that I wanted to board the aircraft. The question hung in the silence of the car. I observed Diana Cole's stillness, the watchful angle of a sentinel, not an attendant. Marcus urged me to be extremely careful about everything I ate or drank on the plane and everyone who approached me. "Get on the plane," he said, but Catherine, I told him I knew. I ended the call, gathered the folder, and stepped into the warm, salt air. I walked toward the plane with a straight spine and a composed face. My mind was racing, but I allowed no outward sign. Thomas always said I was most dangerous when I was most serene. He meant it as a compliment. I intended to prove him right. I have spent 40 years in rooms designed to impress, boardrooms with views that cost more per square foot than most people earned in a year, negotiating suites where the furniture alone communicated a specific argument about power and permanence, the kind of spaces that announce before anyone says a word that the people who inhabit them have already won something significant. I had learned early that the most dangerous rooms were the ones that felt most like sanctuaries, the ones that used beauty and comfort to lower the particular defenses that ugliness and discomfort kept reliably in place. Ether One was one of those rooms. She was a Gulfstream G700 modified to my specifications, over 18 months extended range systems, a reinforced communications suite, sleeping quarters designed for genuine rest rather than the performative rest that most private aircraft offered. The interior was pale ash wood and dark leather, the lighting calibrated to reduce fatigue on transatlantic crossings, the air filtration cycling the entire cabin volume every 4 minutes. I had approved every detail myself. It was in the precise sense of the word mine. And yet, stepping through the cabin door at 7:14, I looked at it the way a woman looks at a familiar room after she's been told it contains something she hasn't found yet. Diana Cole met me in the forward section with the warm, composed efficiency that distinguished her from ordinary flight attendants, or had until this morning, when I had begun to understand that composed efficiency was a skill that could be applied to purposes other than comfort. She was 38, dark-haired, and had been part of Ether One's crew for 14 months, long enough to know my habits, long enough to have learned everything she needed to know. "Good morning, Miss Hargrove," she said. "We're cleared for departure at 7:45, 8 hours and 20 minutes to Zurich. Smooth crossing the Atlantic is quiet today." "Thank you, Diana," I said pleasantly. I moved through the forward cabin with the unhurried ease of a woman on a working flight, nodding to the 2 technical crew members at the forward stations, with the brief acknowledgement I always gave them present, but not lingering the social calibration of someone with things to do. I continued to the private suite at the rear, closed the door, and stood in the center of the room. I gave myself 30 seconds. 30 seconds to feel the full weight of everything Marcus had told me, to let it move through me completely. The insurance policy, the tampered documents, the smile Victor had given me at the car door, the hug from Stella. 30 seconds of complete honesty with myself about what kind of morning this was and what it required. Then I set it aside and began to work. The leather travel case I had packed myself the previous evening was in the overhead compartment where I had placed it during boarding. I lifted it down and set it on the desk, and I examined it with the attention I brought to things that mattered, not the casual glance of routine, but the deliberate examination of someone who knows that details carry information that surfaces don't. The case appeared undisturbed, latch in the correct position, exterior unmarked. I turned it toward the window where the morning light was clean and direct, and I looked at the left hinge, the side I always checked second, which a careful observer would assume I checked least carefully. There was a mark on the hinge pin. Small. A radial scratch left by a tool inserted at an angle rather than straight on. The case had been opened. I unscrewed the compartment lid and examined the cardiovascular tablets, the nano formula capsules my cardiologist had developed specifically for my profile. Each one, the color of deep emerald, each one marked on the underside with a tiny ink stamp. I applied myself in a color I changed monthly and told no one about. Not my physician, not my household staff, not Victor. The capsules in the case were the correct color. The ink stamp on 3 of them was wrong. Not dramatically wrong in the way that a skilled forgery is wrong, with the error visible only to the person who knows precisely what genuine looks like. The color was off by a degree that I could measure, but not describe the difference between the thing itself and a very careful copy of it. I closed the case. I sat down and gave myself another 30 seconds this time, not for feeling, but for thinking. Someone had entered this case. Someone had replaced 3 of my capsules with something that looked identical, but was not. Someone who knew which medication I took, what the capsules looked like, and when I would next need them. Someone who had access to my private bedroom at the Obsidian. I picked up my phone and opened the encrypted messaging application that Leo had installed for me 8 months ago. He had come to the Obsidian for a rare visit and had sat across from me at the kitchen table with his father's quiet eyes and said in that careful way of his that he thought it would be sensible for us to have a communication channel that didn't pass through standard networks. He had not explained why. I had not asked. I had agreed because Leo did not make suggestions without reasons, and because some part of me had understood without articulating it that the reasons were ones I would eventually need to know. I typed case compromised, tablets replaced, have not taken, boarding complete, aware. I sent it and waited. No response came immediately. Leo operated on his own timeline, deliberate and unhurried, the patience of someone who had learned that the right response at the right moment was worth more than the fast response at the wrong one. Thomas had been the same way. I set the phone in my jacket's inside pocket and stood. Through the porthole, the Bahamian airfield was sliding past as the aircraft moved to the runway, the low scrub beyond the perimeter fence, the flat line of the ocean in the distance, the sky the particular blue of a morning that intended to be perfect regardless of what was happening beneath it. I watched it and thought briefly, as I often did in moments of acute difficulty, about Thomas. He'd been a structural engineer before I recruited him into Atheris, a man who spent his professional life understanding how things were held together and what caused them to fail. He used to say that every structure had a load-bearing element and that the most important skill in any crisis was identifying which element that was before it was tested past its limit. I was currently identifying load-bearing elements. Diana Cole appeared at the suite door at 7:31 with a small tray coffee, a folded newspaper, the professional precision of someone who had memorized my preferences. She moved through the familiar choreography of service setting, the tray on the side table with a motion so practiced it approached invisibility. "We'll be airborne in approximately 12 minutes, she said. "Anything you need before takeoff?" "No," I said. "Thank you." She turned to leave. "Diana, I said. She stopped and looked back. Her expression was exactly right, attentive, warm, professionally open. "How are you finding the assignment?" I asked. "The long crossings, it's demanding work." A fraction of a pause, barely perceptible. But I had spent 40 years reading the pauses between words in rooms where everything depended on what people chose not to say. "I enjoy it very much," she said. "The work suits me." "Good," I said. "That will be all." She left. I listened to her footsteps moving forward through the cabin. The aircraft turned onto the runway. The engines gathered themselves with the low, purposeful sound of something designed to move faster than ordinary things. I looked at my phone one final time. Nothing from Leo. Then the phone vibrated not Leo's channel, a standard text from a number I did not recognize. 11 digits in a format that corresponded to no contact I kept. I opened it. 4 words. "Scan your ticket, QR." The ticket was in my jacket's inside pocket, a resting place for documents in transit, a habit formed over decades of navigating the spaces between cities. Stella had handed it to me 4 days ago in a cream envelope with a handwritten note, "Everything is arranged. Just enjoy the journey, Mom." I took it out. It was heavy stock embossed with the Atheris corporate seal. It detailed my route Nassau to Zurich, departing October 14th, 2024. I scanned the precise QR code with my phone, resolving into an itinerary of reference numbers and routing codes. I read it with methodical attention. Departure, Nassau. October 14th, confirmed. Routing North Atlantic Corridor, confirmed. Return flight none scheduled. I read those 2 words 3 times. None scheduled. Not pending, not to be arranged. It was the language of a one-way passage. No return had ever been intended. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, I finally saw the full architecture of the situation. Someone had planned for me to leave the Obsidian and never come back. My mind retreated to a Tuesday morning in April 6 months ago. I had been driving the coast road in my Range Rover when the brakes failed at a sharp curve above a 15-foot drop. For 4 seconds, I steered by instinct, bleeding speed until the bumper stopped inches from the concrete barrier. The investigation found evidence of deliberate interference. Stella had sat beside me in Marcus's office, her face a mask of concern as she took my hand. I had believed her. I told myself it was a random act and allowed it to settle into the category of survived things. Crucially, I had not told Leo. Sitting at 30,000 feet, I realized this was a mistake whose cost was only now becoming clear. I called Marcus. He answered immediately. "The return ticket," I said. "There isn't one." "I know," Marcus replied. The booking had been made 6 weeks ago via Vance Meridian. One way, paid in full. "The medication has been tampered with," I added. "I haven't taken it." Marcus took a heavy breath. He explained that the insurance, the ticket, and the medication were a coordinated plan running for at least 6 months. Julian Vance was the architect, but execution required an insider, someone who knew my habits and schedule, someone who had been inside for years. I thought of the brake line. I thought of Stella's hand on mine and Victor straightening my lapel. "What couldn't you tell me earlier?" I asked. Marcus was still verifying the final piece, but he warned me I was not safe. They did not expect me to reach Zurich. The plan was for me to disappear over the Atlantic, an accident for a 60-year-old woman. He revealed that Dr. Raymond Holt had filed a fraudulent psychiatric history 4 months ago, diagnosing me with severe depressive disorder and suicidal ideation. They were going to say I jumped, I said. The distinction would be left ambiguous, Marcus noted, mentioning the rear balcony. I knew that balcony. I had designed the aircraft. I included that private exterior access point because Thomas once wished to feel the open air at altitude. He had never used it. My phone vibrated with a message from Leo's encrypted channel. "Mom, do not take the medication. Do not drink anything. Do not go near the rear balcony. I know about the plan. I have known for 3 months." I am sorry I didn't tell you sooner. There are people on that aircraft who are with me. You are not alone. L. I read it twice. My son had known for 3 months. I recalled every time I had looked at his quiet eyes recently, unaware that he was carrying this weight alone, protecting me with the same private strength Thomas once had. The discovery that my son had become my protector felt fundamental. Outside the Atlantic was vast and indifferent. I picked up the phone and typed, "Received." I know, I'm ready. C. Then because 30,000 feet above the ocean surrounded by enemies seemed the right moment for truth, I added, "I love you. Now tell me everything. Truth I'm about to reveal will surely leave you speechless. But before I lay my cards on the table, please comment the number 10 so I know you're still here with me until the very end. And please note the following developments include some fictional elements added for dramatic effect. If you don't feel ready for such intense twists, you may turn off the video right here. The encrypted channel opens with a sound I have never grown entirely accustomed to, a low digital click, the kind of sound a lock makes when it disengages from the inside rather than the outside, and then a silence so specific and deliberate that it communicates more than most voices do. Mom, Leo's voice. I have heard it at press conferences where he chose his words with the care of someone who has spent years learning exactly how much language can betray, at board meetings where he sat 2 chairs down from Victor and gave nothing away with his eyes at Thomas's grave on a November morning 19 years ago, when he said nothing at all, and that absence of sound was louder than anything the minister had offered. I have heard it in the middle of the night twice when he was small, and the world had frightened him in ways he hadn't yet developed the architecture to process. I have never heard it quite like this. Controlled precise, but underneath the control, something strained, something that has been held under significant pressure for a significant length of time, and is only now being permitted to breathe. Leo? I say. 32,000 feet. The Atlantic below us, silver and indifferent. Diana Cole somewhere behind me in the galley, quiet in that careful way of hers. Are you all right? I'm fine. A pause. I've been better, but I'm fine. This is Leo's vocabulary, for I have been carrying something I did not want to hand you until I was certain I could hand it to you completely. I have spent 34 years learning to read the particular grammar of my son's understatement. Tell me about Protocol 2. I say. I hear him exhale, not a sigh. Not relief exactly, but the breath of someone who has been waiting for permission to begin and has finally received it. 18 months ago, he says, after the brake line incident, after I saw the post-incident report that Marcus filed and understood what it meant, I made a decision. I didn't tell you. I want to explain why before I explain anything else, because I need you to understand that the silence was not a failure of trust. It was the opposite. Go on. If I had told you what I suspected in April, you would have acted. You act, it's not a criticism. It's the most accurate thing I know about you. You would have confronted Victor or restructured the board or moved the evidence through legal channels before it was complete, and they would have known we knew, and whatever they had planned would have gone underground, and we would have lost the ability to see it. He pauses. I needed them to believe the plan was still viable. I needed them to keep building it, because a plan that is still being built leaves evidence, and I needed evidence. 34 years of raising this man, and he still occasionally surprises me. So you watched, I say. I watched. For 3 months. Marcus will tell you it was 3 months, that's when he came in. But I started earlier. I started the week after the brake line when I ran the post-incident forensics myself and found a secondary data point that wasn't in the official report. A beat. There was a trace amount of hydraulic fluid on the service bay floor at the Obsidian 3 days before the accident. On camera. One of the ground vehicles was in for a standard check, but the technician who signed off on the service log wasn't on our approved roster. He appeared in our system as a substitute contractor. His employment ID traces to a staffing firm in Fort Lauderdale that I have since confirmed is another Vance Meridian shell entity. Julian placed him. Julian placed him. Yes. I look out the window. The cloud layer below has thickened. Somewhere beneath it is the ocean, and somewhere beyond it is Zurich. And in Zurich, there is presumably an outcome that someone has designed for me that does not involve my returning home. Protocol 2, I say again. 4 people, Leo says, on the aircraft with you right now. Thomas Reed is in the forward technical crew. He's the one in the gray uniform who completed the pre-departure walk-around on the starboard side. You may have seen him from the air stairs. Adrian Marsh is in the rear service area, listed in Diana's crew manifest as a junior flight attendant from the Nassau charter pool. He is not. Cecilia Grant is the co-pilot. She replaced the original co-pilot 3 weeks ago, when I found evidence that the original booking had been interfered with through the Vance Meridian travel vendor. And Daniel Sousa is listed on the maintenance log as the Nassau ground liaison, who completed the hydraulics check this morning. He's tracking communications remotely. 4 people. Woven into the fabric of this flight with the kind of structural precision that Thomas used to call load-bearing placement. Nothing decorative, everything essential positioned where the force would transfer. How long did it take you to build that? I ask. A short silence. Longer than I want to admit and faster than was safe, Leo says. But I had help. Marcus, obviously in the legal architecture. And Mom, I need to tell you something about the past 3 months that is harder to say than the operational logistics. Then say it. Another breath. When Leo was 7 years old and Thomas was teaching him to play chess on the table in the East Study, he used to go very still before he made a move. He wasn't sure about not paralyzed, but deliberate a small boy deciding whether the calculated risk was worth the exposure. He still does this. Even over an encrypted satellite channel at 32,000 feet, I can feel it. I have a file, he says. I've had it for 3 months. It contains the insurance documentation, which you now know about, and the psychiatric record, and the one-way ticket, and the brake line forensics, and 43 pages that Marcus compiled on Vance Meridian's financial architecture, and Julian Vance's involvement. He pauses. But there is also a 4th section, a section I compiled myself, and I have spent 3 months trying to decide whether to give it to you before Zurich or after, and I have decided that you need to have it before. What is it? It's about Dad. The cabin is very quiet. The hum of the engines, which has been present since takeoff as a kind of steady, unremarkable bass note beneath every other sound, suddenly seems more distinct, more present. Diana Cole moves somewhere near the galley partition, a small sound, a cabinet closing softly. Leo, I know you have always believed that Dad died of a cardiac event, he says. I know that's what the death certificate says. I know that's what the hospital in Nassau reported, and what the attending physician documented, and what we buried with him in November 2005. I know that for 19 years that has been the shape of what happened. A pause so measured it feels like a held breath. I don't believe that's what happened, and I haven't believed it for 11 years. 11 years. My son has been carrying this for 11 years, and I did not know. When did you start investigating? My voice is steady. I have trained it to be steady in exactly these moments, the moments when steadiness is the only useful response to something that wants to break you open. When I was 23, he says, I was reviewing the Aetheris founding documents for a corporate restructuring. I was still at the firm, then doing transactional work, and Marcus had pulled the original partnership agreements. There was a document in the file I'd never seen, an insurance rider on Dad's personal life policy, a separate instrument from the corporate policy, a personal one he had taken out in 1999. The beneficiary structure had been amended in 2004, 1 year before he died. The amendment removed me as the secondary beneficiary. It didn't add a new one. It simply removed my name and left the primary beneficiary unchanged. He pauses. The amendment was witnessed by a notary in Miami. I traced the notary. She retired in 2006. Her client log for 2004 listed 3 entries connected to the Hargrove name. One was Dad. The second was a corporate vehicle. The third was a woman whose name I did not recognize, but whose address corresponded to a serviced apartment in Coral Gables that I later traced to a property management company connected to Julian Vance. The cloud layer outside is complete now. There is no ocean visible beneath us, no ground, nothing below but white and gray, and the particular blankness of altitude. Victor, I say. It comes out quiet, not a question. Victor was with Julian Vance long before he was with you. Leo says, I believe they planned it together. I believe the original target was Atheris, the company, the intellectual property, the Project 5 K13 architectural framework that Dad built before he died and that you completed after. I believe that when their first approach failed, when Dad's legal structure held and they couldn't access the company through corporate mechanisms, they changed the method. They changed the method, I repeat. Yes, Mom. His voice drops half a register, not in volume, but in weight. I believe they killed Dad, and I believe I can prove it. I've been building the proof for 11 years. The final piece arrived 3 months ago, which is why I activated Protocol 2 when I did. A pause. I have Eleanor. I have Dad's journal, the one he kept in the locked room at the Obsidian that you've never opened. I found it 8 weeks ago behind the wall panel near his drafting desk. He wrote everything down. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know what form it would take. The engines hum. The clouds move below us. I am 60 years old, and I have built one of the most consequential aerospace companies in the world, from a partnership agreement and a structural engineer's idea, and I've been sitting on this aircraft for less than 3 hours, and my son has just handed me the weight of 2 decades in a single transmission. Leo, I say, yes, I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning, all of it. A silence, that deliberate, load-bearing silence that I've known since he was 9 years old, standing in November rain. Mom, he says, what I'm about to tell you about how Dad really died, it is going to change everything you think you know about the last 20 years. Start from the beginning, I say. The encrypted channel carries his voice without interference. Clean satellite routed, designed by Leo himself 18 months ago, using a compression protocol he adapted from Atheris's secure aerospace telemetry system. He built it, he told me at the time, because commercial encryption had too many known vulnerability points, and he wanted something that did not exist in any public architecture. I thought he was being thorough. I understand now that he was being prepared. November 2004, Leo says. That's where it starts. Not with the accident, not with the cardiac event, with a meeting. I say nothing. I let him build it. Julian Vance requested a meeting with Dad in November 2004. I found the calendar entry in the Atheris archive, a private notation Dad made in his personal scheduling file, not the corporate calendar. He noted the meeting as JV Private Reacquisition Inquiry. Julian was running a mid-size aerospace component manufacturer at the time, Vance Dynamics, and the meeting was framed as a preliminary discussion about a potential licensing arrangement for a propulsion patent that Atheris held. Leo pauses. Dad went to the meeting. It was held at a hotel in Midtown Manhattan, the Biltmore, a private dining room, November 17th. I know this because Dad wrote about it in his journal. 4 pages, which is more than he gave most things. Thomas wrote in a specific hand, architectural, precise, each letter formed with the same deliberateness he brought to structural drawings. I used to read his notes and think that his handwriting looked like something designed to hold weight. What did he write? He wrote that Julian Vance didn't want a licensing arrangement, Leo says. He wanted Atheris, all of it. The company, the Project 5 K13 framework, the propulsion architecture, the Bahamas facility, the Nassau airfield. He made an offer. Dad wrote the number down, $800 million for full acquisition, with a 5-year consultancy agreement for Dad and a defined exit for you from the operational structure. A beat. Dad declined. He wrote, and I have this exact, because I've read it enough times that I have it memorized. I told him that a theorist is not a transaction. It is a thing we built together, and it will remain a thing we built together, and no number changes that. He smiled when I said it. I did not like the smile. I did not like the smile. Thomas wrote that in November 2004. He was dead by January 2005. After the meeting, Leo continues, Dad began documenting. He didn't tell you, I think he didn't want to alarm you before he understood the full shape of what Vance was. But he kept notes. He tracked two things in parallel: any irregular activity in Atheris's financial architecture and any personal contact between Julian Vance and people in their immediate orbit. Leo's voice is steady, but I can hear the precision in it, the precision of someone reciting something they have rehearsed in private many times before saying it out loud. In December 2004, Dad noted something: a woman who had begun appearing in Victor Hargrove's social circle. Victor, who was at the time a mid-level aviation finance consultant that Atheris had retained for a single project, nothing significant, no executive access. Dad noted the woman's name in his journal. He described her as a contact of Julian Vance's placed deliberately. Victor. In December 2004, Victor was a mid-level consultant. I did not marry him until 2017. I have spent 7 years believing that what connected us was circumstance and timing, and the particular loneliness of a woman who had built something enormous and had no one left to build it with. The woman's name, I say. Elaine Marsh, Leo says. She doesn't exist anymore, the identity, I mean. The social security number traces to a closed file. But I found a photograph from a Manhattan charity event in December 2004, a children's hospital benefit black tie. Elaine Marsh is in the background of 3 photographs. In one of them, she is standing 18 inches from Victor Hargrove. In another, she is speaking to a man whose face is partially obscured, but whose build and height match Julian Vance's documented profile within acceptable margin. He pauses. And in the third photograph, she is standing beside a woman I recognized. It took me 2 years to confirm it. Who? Stella's mother, Leo says. Not Julian Vance's wife, his partner from the early 2000s, a woman named Renata Vance who gave birth to Stella in 2002 and who died in a car accident in 2008. Stella was 6. Another pause. Mom. Julian Vance, Victor Hargrove, and a woman connected to both of them were in the same room in December 2004, 6 weeks before Dad died. The cabin is very still, the hum of the engines, the light through the oval window diffuse and gray at altitude. The cardiac event, I say. Dad was 53 and in excellent health. His annual physical in October 2004, 8 weeks before he died, showed no cardiac indicators of concern. Normal blood pressure, normal rhythm cholesterol, managed no family history. His physician at the time was a cardiologist at NYU Medical Center named Dr. Paul Rice. I contacted Dr. Rice 4 years ago. He is retired now, living in Vermont. He agreed to speak with me under an informal arrangement, not legally, not on record, but as a man who had been carrying something for a long time and found it easier to set down than to continue holding. Leo's voice changes slightly, not breaking, but altered by weight. Dr. Rice told me that on January 14, 2005, 3 days before Dad died, he received a call from a physician he did not know. The caller identified himself as a consulting cardiologist who had seen Thomas Hargrove for a second opinion appointment at a private clinic in Nassau. The caller said Dad had reported chest symptoms during air travel and had requested a discretionary assessment. The caller asked Dr. Rice to confirm the details of Dad's last ECG results. Did he confirm them? He said he declined, Leo says. He said he told the caller that any consultation request would need to go through the standard referral process. The caller thanked him and ended the call. A pause. Dr. Rice never reported the call because he thought it was administrative confusion, a new physician trying to navigate records access and not knowing the protocol. He thought about it after Dad died. He thought about it for years, but he had no proof of anything, and grief is not evidence. I think about Thomas 3 days before he died. I think about him on January 14th, 2005. I think about what he was doing that afternoon, whether he knew, whether something in him had understood the shape of what was coming. The way a structural engineer understands a load-bearing point under stress from the inside before the visible signs appear on the surface. The final piece, I say. You said it arrived 3 months ago. Yes. Leo takes a breath, not for drama, but for the particular care that the next sentence requires. 3 months ago, Marcus located a secondary financial record in the Vance Meridian architecture, a payment made in January 2005, 22 days after Dad died, from a Vance Meridian predecessor entity to a private medical logistics firm in Nassau. The firm was dissolved in 2007. The payment notation reads in the original document service completion, Hargrove Protocol. The words settle in the cabin like something that has been falling for a very long time and has finally reached the floor. Service completion, Hargrove Protocol. They paid them, I say. My voice is flat, not empty, the opposite of empty, so full that there is no room left for inflection. Yes, Leo says quietly. I look at the watch on my wrist, the Patek Philippe, hand wound, the watch that needs you, so you never forget that some things require your attention to keep running. Thomas gave it to me, and Thomas is dead, and the people who arranged his death have been inside my life for years. One of them sleeping in the bedroom across the hall, one of them handing me coffee this morning in a structured blazer with her father's pale gray eyes. Leo. My voice is very quiet now, not diminished. Quiet in the way that certain things become quiet when they have gathered enough force to no longer require volume. Are you safe in New York? I have been, he says. I have been careful. Team Shadow has a parallel unit covering the Atheris Tower and my apartment. Marcus is at his office with copies of everything in 3 separate secured locations. Good. I look out at the cloud layer below, still white, still complete, still keeping the ocean hidden. Then here is what we are going to do. Mom, we are going to finish this, I say. All of it. Every piece of it. Victor, Stella, Julian, Vance, the insurance architecture, the psychiatric file, the one-way ticket, and the 20-year-old debt they owe this family. I pause. And we are going to do it cleanly and completely and without a single error, because that is what your father would have done. And then we are going to put it in front of people who cannot ignore it and let the weight of it speak for itself. A silence. Then Leo says very quietly, he wrote something in the last entry of the journal, the final page. I've been trying to decide whether to tell you before or after. A pause. He wrote it for you. The 43 pages arrive at 34,000 feet. Marcus sends them through the encrypted relay at 9:17, a compressed document package, triple authenticated, the kind of file architecture that takes longer to open than most people have patience for, and that I have trained myself to navigate without rushing, because documents that arrive under these circumstances deserve to be received with the same care that went into assembling them. I set the secondary device on the conference table and open the file. The first section is financial reconstruction. 41 transactions across 9 entities spanning November 2004 to February 2005, traced through 4 jurisdictions: Delaware, the Cayman Islands, Nassau, and a private banking institution in Zurich that I recognize as one Julian Vance has used in previous Atheris-adjacent dealings. Marcus has color-coded the transaction chains, blue for Vance Meridian predecessor entities, red for the medical logistics firm in Nassau, green for the personal accounts of individuals connected to both. The payment marked service completion, Hargrove Protocol, sits in the red column dated January 28, 2005, 11 days after Thomas died. I read each transaction line carefully. This is not the work of an impulsive man. Julian Vance built this over months, funded it through layers designed to absorb scrutiny, and paid for it in a currency-structured financial instruments, not wire transfers that was meant to look like ordinary corporate activity if anyone ever looked. Anyone who was not looking for it specifically would have seen nothing. Marcus found it because Marcus has spent 21 years learning the particular grammar of things that are designed not to be found. Thomas found none of it, but Thomas suspected, and Thomas, being Thomas, wrote it down. The second section is the communication log. Marcus has reconstructed a partial email archive from a private account Julian Vance used in 2004. Not his corporate address, a secondary account registered through a provider that no longer exists, recovered through a forensic subpoena of archived server data that Marcus obtained through a civil discovery process unrelated to this case 3 years ago while working a separate matter. He held it. He told me once, years before any of this, that the best attorneys kept things until the things became relevant. I did not ask him what things. I understand now. The emails are partial fragments recovered rather than complete, but 3 of them are sufficient. The first dated November 22, 2004, 5 days after Thomas's acquisition meeting with Julian Th. declined. Expected. Proceed to Phase 2, per our conversation. V is confirmed for December placement. The second dated December 14, 2004 placement successful. Event attendance confirmed. Initial contact established. Timeline remains January. The third dated January 9, 2005, 8 days before Thomas died, medical consultation arranged. Nassau Clinic Thursday. R has been briefed. Outcome expected within 10 days. R has been briefed. R. I think about this for a moment. Not Dr. Rice Leo confirmed that Rice declined to cooperate and did not know what the caller was. Someone else. A name beginning with R briefed on what was to happen, positioned at a Nassau clinic 8 days before my husband's heart stopped in our home on a Tuesday morning in January, while I was in the East Study reviewing quarterly projections, and Leo was at school, and Thomas was alone in the upstairs hallway and fell. I remember the sound. I have spent 19 years trying not to remember it and have never entirely succeeded. A particular sound that I understood before I reached the hallway, before I saw him, before any of the subsequent events of that day, or that year, or the 19 years that followed, a sound that the body registers before the mind catches up, that lives below language, below thought, in the part of a person that simply knows. I close my eyes for 3 seconds. This is the maximum I permit myself. Then I open them and continue reading. The third section is Thomas's movement reconstruction. Marcus compiled it from Thomas's personal calendar, his Atheris access logs, his Nassau airfield records, and his personal credit card statements for the final 12 weeks of his life. It is 21 pages, and it is the most intimate document I have read since Leo placed Thomas's journal in my hands 8 weeks ago, because it is Thomas's last 3 months rendered in data. The quiet geography of a man's ordinary days made suddenly significant by what came after them. October 14, 2004. Thomas at the Obsidian working on the 5K13 structural framework. I remember this day. I was in New York for a board meeting. He called me that evening and told me the propulsion sequencing had resolved a problem he had been working on for 14 months, and his voice had the particular quality it carried when something he had been thinking about for a long time had finally arrived at its correct form. I remember telling him to come to New York for the weekend to celebrate. He said he would take me to dinner at the place on Lexington that we liked. He never made the reservation because 3 days later, Julian Vance requested the acquisition meeting, and Thomas spent the following week very quiet in the way he became quiet when something required his full attention. He never told me about the meeting. I understand now that he was protecting me from something he hadn't yet mapped completely. Thomas did not present problems before he had at least the outline of a solution. It was a quality I found in 32 years of marriage simultaneously admirable and maddening. November 17, 2004. The Biltmore meeting. Thomas's calendar entry. JV private reacquisition inquiry. 60-minute block, 12:30 to 1:30. He was back at the Atheris offices by 3. His access log shows he pulled the corporate charter documents at 3:14 and held them for 40 minutes. He was looking at the ownership structure, making sure it was intact, making sure there was no angle of entry he had missed. There wasn't. The charter held. Julian Vance could not acquire Atheris through any legitimate structural mechanism, so he arranged a different kind of entry. December. Victor Hargrove, mid-level aviation finance consultant, retained by Atheris on a single project. I have to sit with this for a moment, the particular discomfort of understanding that a man I would eventually marry spent December 2004 being positioned into my orbit by the person who had arranged for my husband's death. Victor, attending the Children's Hospital benefit. Victor in the same room as Elaine Marsh. Julian's planted operative. Victor being prepared like a key being cut for a lock that did not yet need opening. The marriage was 2017, 12 years later. Julian Vance is a patient man. The 4th section is the journal photographs. Marcus photographed 31 pages of Thomas's journal from the hidden compartment behind the drafting desk at the Obsidian. Leo found the compartment. Marcus documented it. The photographs are high resolution, the handwriting precise and unmistakable, that architectural hand each letter formed to hold weight. I do not read all 31 pages here. I will read them at the Obsidian in the locked room when this is over, in the way that certain things deserve to be read slowly, without urgency, with the full presence of a person who is no longer managing a crisis and can simply be present to what was left behind. But I read one entry, the one Marcus marked with a small notation in the margin of his cover document, January 11th, 2005, 6 days before. Thomas wrote, "I don't know what form it will take. I know something is coming because I have been watching the load-bearing points, and I can feel the stress accumulating in places it should not. I have told no one because I have not yet found the proof that would make telling someone useful rather than merely frightening. When I find it, I will tell Catherine first. I will always tell Catherine first. If I don't get the chance, and I am writing this particular entry because I have begun to consider the possibility that I may not get the chance, then I need Leo to find this. Leo will find it because Leo has always understood that the things worth keeping are the things that are hidden with care. I need him to take care of his mother, not in the way that people say that, not as a sentimental instruction, but practically, structurally. I need him to stand in the places I would have stood. Catherine, if you are reading this, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was trying to solve it first. You know how I am. You have always known how I am, and you have loved me anyway, which is the most extraordinary thing anyone has ever done. The watch needs winding. Don't forget." I set the device down on the conference table. Diana Cole is at the forward galley partition. The engines maintain their steady register. Outside the window, the cloud layer continues white and unbroken and covering everything below. I pick up the encrypted device. I type a single message to Leo. I read it. I'm ready. Tell Thomas Reed we begin. Thomas Reed moves first. I don't see it happen. He is in the forward technical area separated from the conference cabin by a partition and a locked door. But I feel the shift in the aircraft's atmosphere, the way you feel a change in barometric pressure before a storm arrives. Something tightens. Something that was held loosely is now held with intention. I remain at the conference table with the device in my hand and Marcus's 43 pages still open on the screen. To anyone watching, to Diana Cole, who has repositioned herself near the mid-cabin galley with the careful nonchalance of someone trying very hard to appear unconcerned, I am simply a 60-year-old woman reviewing documents on a transatlantic flight. This is in fact exactly what I am. The difference is in the nature of the documents and the quality of my attention. I think about Thomas. Not the January version, not the journal entry, not the movement log, not the financial reconstruction that ends 11 days after his death, with a payment notation that I will spend the rest of my life understanding, was the last transaction in a deliberate erasure. I think about the earlier Thomas, the one who existed before November 2004, and the acquisition meeting, and the quiet 3 months of a man watching load-bearing points for signs of stress. I think about the Thomas who taught Leo to play chess on the East study table, who chose each piece's opening position with the same deliberateness he brought to structural drawings, who told Leo I was in the doorway, not interrupting, simply present that the most important move in any game was the one you made before your opponent realized the game had already begun. Leo was 9. He looked at his father across the board with those serious Thomas-shaped eyes and said, "How do you know when the game has already begun?" Thomas thought about it for a moment in the way he thought about questions that deserved genuine answers rather than convenient ones. Then he said, "When the other person starts being careful." I look at Diana Cole. She is being very careful. Leo was 4 years old when I understood for the first time the specific weight of raising a child who resembles the person you love most in the world. It is not a simple comfort. It is something more complicated, a continuous act of recognition that is also a continuous act of loss. A daily reminder that the person you see in the child's face is present and absent, simultaneously close enough to touch in the curve of a jawline or the particular stillness before a considered answer, and irretrievably elsewhere in every other way. Thomas's eyes. Thomas's hands, long-fingered, precise. The hands of a man who understood that fine work required fine instruments and the patience to use them correctly. Thomas's quality of attention, which was total and unhurried, and which made you feel when it was directed at you that you were the most comprehensible thing in the room. Leo grew up without that attention after January 2005. He was 11 years old when Thomas died, old enough to understand permanence, young enough that the understanding arrived before he had the vocabulary to process it, which is perhaps the most difficult developmental position grief can place a child in. Old enough to know his father was not coming back, young enough that he spent the following 3 years waiting anyway, in the way children wait quietly without announcing it, with a patience that looks from the outside like adjustment, but is from the inside something else entirely. I was present. I want to be clear about that because the alternative, the version of this story in which a grieving mother disappears into her company and her loss and leaves her son to navigate the absence alone, is not what happened, and Thomas would not have permitted it to happen, and I would not have permitted it either. I was present. I drove Leo to school and attended the events and sat with him in the East study in the evenings when he wanted company, and left him alone in the evenings when he wanted that instead, and I learned over months and years to read the difference. But I was also grieving. And grief, however carefully managed, however cleanly contained within the appropriate hours, leaves a residue. Leo knew. Leo has always known the things I don't say out loud. It is, I think, the most significant inheritance Thomas left him. The ability to read the load-bearing points of a person's interior architecture and understand where the stress is accumulating even before the visible signs appear on the surface. He watched me grieve for 2 years without naming it, and then one evening in the East study he was 13 doing homework at Thomas's old drafting table, which I had never moved because moving it felt like a concession I was not prepared to make. He looked up from his work and said, "Mom, Dad would want you to be okay." Not Dad would want you to move on. Not Dad would want you to be happy. He said, okay, Thomas's word, the exact calibration Thomas would have used, precise in its modesty, asking only for the minimum survivable condition and trusting that the rest would follow. I told him I was working on it. He said, I know, I can tell. Then he went back to his homework, and I sat there for a long time afterward with the particular ache of understanding that my son had spent 2 years monitoring my well-being with the same structural precision his father brought to load-bearing analysis, and had waited until he had sufficient evidence before offering his assessment. He was 13 years old. I am thinking about this about Leo at 13, about Thomas at the drafting table, about the East study and the November rain and 19 years of absence. When Diana Cole approaches the conference table, she carries a tray, silver rectangular, the Atheris monogram on the corner, a single glass of whiskey, amber 2 fingers, a perfect pour, the kind that takes practice. Beside it, a small card with the Ether One logo and a handwritten note for the crossing, with compliments. She sets it on the table 6 inches from my right hand and smiles with exactly the warmth that training produces. "We're approximately 4 hours from Zurich," she says. "Is there anything else I can bring you, Mrs. Hargrove?" I look at the glass. The whiskey catches the cabin light, amber and gold, the color of a Bahamas evening. The color Thomas used to call the good hour because it was the hour the light made everything look like it was worth what it had cost. I look at Diana Cole. "Thank you," I say. "I'll let it breathe for a moment." She nods and withdraws. I do not touch the glass. I pick up the encrypted device and type to Thomas Reed. She's made her move. Hold position. Confirm Protocol 2 status. The reply comes in 11 seconds. All 4 confirmed. Ready on your signal. I set the device face down on the table, fold my hands, and look out the window at the white, unbroken cloud layer below. 4 hours to Zurich. Thomas Reed and Adrian Marsh and Cecilia Grant and Daniel Sousa positioned and waiting. Marcus on the ground with 43 pages of evidence in 3 secured locations. Leo in New York building the counter-architecture that will dismantle everything Julian Vance spent 20 years constructing. And on the table beside my right hand, a glass of whiskey that someone went to considerable trouble to ensure I would drink. I think about Thomas at the chess table telling a 9-year-old boy that the most important move is the one you make before your opponent realizes the game has already begun. The game, I think, began a very long time ago. The whiskey sits untouched. I've been looking at it for 11 minutes, not obsessively, not with the fixed attention of someone who cannot look away, but with the peripheral awareness of a person who has learned to keep dangerous things within their field of vision without giving those things the satisfaction of appearing dangerous. It is a skill. Thomas taught it to me without intending to in the years when Atheris was young, and every board meeting contained at least one person who wanted the company to be something other than what we had built it to be. And the skill was this: you watch the thing that threatens you the way you watch the horizon from a ship, not staring, not ignoring, simply present to it, so that when it moves, you have already moved first. Diana Cole is at the rear galley now. I can hear the quiet industry of someone maintaining the performance of ordinary work cabinet doors, the soft percussion of serviceware, the specific silence between sounds that belongs to a person who is listening while pretending not to. I open the encrypted device. Leo's last message arrived 4 minutes ago. Package at 60%. FBI counterfiling on schedule. Pharaoh has been neutralized. Julian's federal pathway closes in approximately 90 minutes. Thomas Reed has the rear partition covered. Do not approach the external deck regardless of circumstances. Confirm you have not consumed anything from the galley. I type back, confirmed. Nothing consumed. Whiskey on the table. Diana has made her approach, waiting for your signal. His response is immediate hold. I need 40 minutes. Do not move against her until I confirm the package is filed. If we move early, Julian's attorneys can argue the chain of evidence was broken by onboard intervention before the federal filing was complete. 40 minutes, Mom. Then you can burn it all down. I read the last sentence twice. Then you can burn it all down. Thomas never spoke like that. Leo does occasionally a crack in the precise exterior, a flash of something warmer and less controlled underneath the emotional register that Leo manages so carefully, and that surfaces, when it surfaces, with a vividness that catches me off guard every time because it is so entirely his own. Not Thomas, not me. Leo specifically in the particular way that children become themselves in the spaces between their parents. I type 40 minutes. I'll be here. Then I set the device down and fold my hands on the table and wait, which is something I have become over 60 years exceptionally good at. The first time I understood that waiting was a form of power rather than an absence of it, I was 31 years old and sitting across a conference table from a man named Gerald Harwick, who ran the largest aerospace procurement office on the eastern seaboard and who had been making Thomas and me wait for 11 months for a contract decision that would determine whether Atheris survived its third year. Gerald Harwick was a man who used other people's urgency as leverage. He scheduled meetings and then arrived late. He asked questions and then interrupted the answers. He was in the vocabulary of that era's business culture, a man who understood that time was currency, and that the person who controlled the pace of a conversation controlled its outcome. I arrived at that meeting 45 minutes early, and I was still there when Gerald Harwick left 4 hours later, and in the intervening time I said exactly what I intended to say, and nothing that I did not, and I waited through every silence and every interruption and every manufactured delay with the specific patience of a person who has decided that the outcome is already determined and that the only remaining question is how long the other party needs to reach the same conclusion. We got the contract. Thomas asked me afterward how I had stayed so calm. I told him I wasn't calm, I was certain. There is a difference. Calm is an absence of agitation. Certainty is a foundation. You can be certain and frightened simultaneously. You cannot be calm and frightened simultaneously, but you can be certain and frightened, and the certainty holds the floor, so the fear has nowhere to go. I am certain now. At 9:41, Leo sends a message, 68%. Julian's Nassau contact has gone dark. Team Shadow Ground Unit confirmed his location. He won't be making calls for the next several hours. At 9:53, 81%. Marcus has the Simmons documentation. Greg Simmons has been formally served. He's cooperating. Full financial disclosure within the hour. At 10:04, 90%. FBI counterfiling is queued. 12 minutes. Diana Cole emerges from the rear galley at 10:07. She walks the length of the cabin with the measured step of someone executing a timed sequence, stops 2 feet from the conference table, and looks at the whiskey glass. It is still full. 2 fingers of amber whiskey undisturb the surface, entirely still in the way that things are still at altitude, when the air is smooth and nothing has been touched. Something moves across her face. Not quite worry, not quite frustration, the micro-expression of a person whose calculation has encountered a variable it did not anticipate. She recovers it in less than a second, but I have been watching her for 3 hours with the specific attention of a woman who knows exactly what is in that glass, and I do not miss it. "Mrs. Hargrove," she says, "may I refresh anything for you?" "The whiskey is fine," I say. I prefer to let it settle. A pause of precisely the wrong length, not the natural pause of a flight attendant registering a passenger's preference, but the pause of a person processing an outcome that has not arrived on schedule. "Of course," she says. She does not move immediately. We're approximately 3 hours and 40 minutes from Zurich. The captain has confirmed smooth air through the European corridor. "Thank you, Diana." She withdraws. I pick up the encrypted device. She came back to check. The glass is untouched and she knows it. Leo 10 minutes. Hold. I look at the whiskey. The cabin light catches the surface amber and gold perfectly still. I think about the Thomas journal entry and the payment notation and the email fragment R has been briefed. Outcome expected within 10 days. I think about a man named R in a Nassau clinic in January 2005, briefed on what was required. And I think about whether R is a name I will eventually find in the architecture Marcus is building on the ground. I will find it. I find everything I look for given sufficient time and sufficient reason. I have both. At 10:14, Leo sends FILED. Package received by FBI Field Office Manhattan. Julian's frame-up of me has been formally countered with forensic documentation. Chain of evidence is intact and clean. Federal protection order is in place. A pause of 4 seconds, and then Mom. We have them. All of them. You can move. I set the device down. I look at Thomas Reed's position near the forward partition. I cannot see him, but I know precisely where he is, because Leo built Protocol 2 with the same structural precision Thomas brought to load-bearing placement, and Thomas Reed is exactly where he needs to be. I look at the whiskey glass. Then I press the call button above the conference table, a single deliberate press, the kind that produces a soft chime audible throughout the cabin. Diana Cole appears in 11 seconds. She is composed, professional. She has been waiting for this call. Diana. I say very quietly in the tone I use for board resolutions and final decisions and things that are not requested. I think it's time we had an honest conversation. Diana Cole does not sit down. This is itself information. A flight attendant summoned by a passenger in a private aircraft has 2 possible responses to an invitation to conversation. She sits because the passenger has the authority to extend that invitation, or she does not sit because something in her calculation has determined that remaining standing preserves an option she is not yet ready to surrender. Diana remains standing. She positions herself 2 feet from the conference table, with her hands folded at her waist, the posture of someone maintaining professional form while the interior architecture beneath it undergoes rapid reassessment. "Mrs. Hargrove," she says. "Of course." I gesture to the chair across from me. "Please." A half-second delay. Then she sits not with the ease of someone accepting an offer, but with the controlled movement of someone executing a tactical decision. She is 29 years old and she has been trained well. I find myself thinking briefly and without sentimentality that under different circumstances, she might have been genuinely good at this work. "The whiskey," I say. Her expression does not change. "I'm sorry." "The whiskey you brought me 40 minutes ago." I look at the glass still sitting at 6 inches from my right hand, still full, still entirely undisturbed. I'd like to know what's in it. The silence that follows is 4 seconds long. I count them with the same precision I use for everything that matters. In those 4 seconds, Diana Cole makes 3 calculations. I can see them moving behind her eyes, the way weather moves behind glass, and arrives at the one she has been trained to arrive at when the primary approach has been compromised. She opens her mouth. "Don't," I say quietly, not unkindly, simply with the finality of a person who has already heard every version of what she is about to say and has no interest in any of them. "I know what it is. I know who gave it to you. I know the amount, and I know the mechanism, and I know the timeline. What I'm offering you right now, and this offer has an expiration, Diana, so I need you to listen carefully, is the opportunity to tell me the truth before the alternative becomes significantly worse for you than the truth." She looks at me across the conference table. 29 years old, trained in Zurich, hired 8 months ago on a recommendation I have since traced to a staffing firm connected to Vance Meridian Holdings. She is not, I think, a bad person. She is a person who made a calculation and then made a second calculation that compounded the first, and she is now sitting across from the subject of that calculation at 35,000 feet with nowhere to go, and 4 members of a covert security team positioned at strategic points throughout the aircraft. The math of her situation is not complex. "It was Stella," she says. I do not react. This is important not for strategic reasons, though it is strategically useful, but because reaction in this moment would be a form of concession, an acknowledgement that the information has altered my position. It has not altered my position. It has confirmed it. There is a difference, and maintaining that difference is the difference between control and the appearance of control. "Tell me how it was arranged," I say. Diana's hands folded on the table tighten slightly at the knuckles. 6 weeks ago, I received a message through a private channel and app I'd been given when I was hired, told it was for internal Aetherius communications. The message came from a name I didn't recognize at first. It took me 2 days to understand who it was from. A pause. "Stella Hargrove. She said she was coordinating a medical monitoring protocol for your flight, that you had a cardiac condition that required careful management, and that the attending physician had prescribed a specific compound to be administered in a beverage during the transatlantic crossing. She said it was authorized at the executive level. She said the documentation would follow. Did the documentation follow? A file came through the same channel. It had the Aetheris letterhead, a physician's signature, Raymond Holt. It looked... She stops, restarts. It looked legitimate. I thought it was legitimate. I look at her steadily. And when did you stop thinking it was legitimate? The knuckles tighten further. 2 weeks ago. I tried to verify the protocol through the Aetheris medical office directly, a separate inquiry, nothing that would flag, and the office had no record of it. No Raymond Holt on file, no cardiac monitoring protocol, nothing. She looks down at the table for a moment, then back up. I contacted Stella through the app. She told me the protocol was confidential executive level and that any independent verification attempt would constitute a breach of my employment agreement. But you didn't withdraw. A long pause. No. Why? She is quiet for a moment that is not evasion but something more like the specific stillness of a person arriving at a truth they have been avoiding. Because by then I understood enough to know that withdrawing was not safe. Not for me. I absorb this. Diana Cole is 29 years old and she was placed in an impossible position by people who are very good at placing people in impossible positions. This does not excuse what she carried onto this aircraft in a glass of amber whiskey, but it is context, and context matters, and I am 60 years old, and I have learned that the people who arrange these things are rarely the people who execute them, and that the distance between arrangement and execution is where the real moral weight lives. What compound, and I say? She tells me. A synthetic cardiac alkaloid. The name is pharmaceutical precise, the kind of knowledge that comes from a document rather than independent understanding. Concentrated in solution, colorless, tasteless. Mechanism progressive interference, with cardiac rhythm presenting as natural arrhythmia. Onset 4 to 6 hours post-consumption. Outcome at the administered dose. Acute cardiac event, at altitude, likely fatal consistent with a passenger's documented history of cardiac risk and the clinical file created by Raymond Holt. Consistent with the documented history. The file Marcus found in the Miami-Dade system, 4 sessions with a physician who had never treated me, a diagnosis of recurrent major depressive disorder with suicidal ideation and a preoccupation with heights and air travel. A blueprint, Marcus called it. He was precise. My secondary device vibrates. Leo Diana has been on the cabin floor for 11 minutes since you pressed the call button. Thomas Reed confirms her position. Adrian Marsh is in rear position. What's your status? I type without looking down. Conversation in progress. She's talking. Hold all positions. Leo copy. Marcus reports Victor has not left the Obsidian. Stella's location confirmed Nassau 22 minutes from the airfield. Swiss coordination team is on standby in Zurich. FBI Manhattan has the full filing. We are ready on every front. How long do you need? I look at Diana Cole across the conference table. She is 29 years old and she is frightened, and she is telling the truth, which is the most useful thing she can do at this altitude, and possibly the most useful thing she has done in the past 6 weeks. Give me 20 minutes, I type. Then we move. Diana, I say. She looks up. I'm going to ask you to do something, and I need you to understand that what you do in the next 20 minutes will be the most important decision of your adult life. Not because of what it means for me, I have this regardless of what you decide, but because of what it means for you and what you're able to say about yourself when this is over. I pause. I need a full written account. Everything Stella told you, every message she sent, every instruction, every document, the app, the file, the compound, the timeline, all of it written down, signed and witnessed by a member of the flight crew you trust. She stares at me. You want me to testify? I want you to tell the truth, I say. Testifying is what comes after. a silence. Outside the window, the cloud layer has begun to break fragments of blue visible, now the first glimpse of the upper Atlantic in hours. Somewhere below that blue is the coast of Europe, and beyond it Zurich, and beyond that an outcome that someone designed to end with my death and which I intend to redirect toward a significantly different destination. Diana Cole looks at the whiskey glass. Then she looks at me. "All right," she says. Diana writes for 17 minutes. I give her the secondary notepad from the conference table, cream paper Etheris, embossed the kind of stationery that exists on this aircraft because Thomas believed that certain communications deserved a physical form, that words committed to paper carried a different weight than words committed to a screen. He was right about most things. He was right about this. She writes in a careful, deliberate hand, not the hand of someone fabricating, but the hand of someone who has been holding something for 6 weeks and is now releasing it with the specific relief of a person who has decided that the cost of honesty is lower than the cost of continuing. I watch her write without appearing to watch the way I have watched boardrooms and courtrooms and difficult conversations for 30 years, with the peripheral attention of someone who has learned that the most important information is usually delivered by the person who believes they are not being observed. At 10:41, she sets the pen down. I read the document. 4 pages. The initial contact through the private app October 2nd, a message from an account identified as SVH, which Diana understood after 2 days to mean Stella Vance Hargrove, the framing of the compound as a prescribed cardiac protocol, the forged Etheris letterhead, the Raymond Holt signature, the follow-up message 2 weeks ago when Diana attempted independent verification and was warned off, the final instruction received 48 hours before departure administer during the Atlantic crossing between hours 3 and 5. Do not deviate from the timing. Confirm delivery through the app. The compound itself, Stella provided it in a sealed pharmaceutical vial delivered to Diana's Nassau apartment by a courier service, untraceable, Diana noted, because the courier wore no identifying uniform and paid cash for the building entrance. The vial had a typed label, Hargrove Protocol Cardiac Monitoring Compound Dose, single administration in 60 milliliters beverage. Beneath the label, in smaller type, Authorized R. Holt, MD. I reach the final paragraph of Diana's account. She is written in the careful hand of someone choosing each word with the precision of someone who understands that these words will outlast this aircraft and this altitude. I knew by the time I boarded this flight that what I had been asked to administer was not a medical compound. I did not know precisely what it was. I told myself that I did not know. I understand now that telling myself I did not know was a choice, and that choices have consequences, and I am prepared to accept the consequences of mine. I look up from the page. "Thank you," I say. She nods once, the small, precise movement of someone who has arrived at the far side of something difficult and does not yet know what the far side looks like. I pick up the encrypted device. Diana's written account is complete. 4 pages signed. Compound identified as synthetic cardiac alkaloid, Stella confirmed as Architect App Communications documented courier delivery noted. Thomas Reed. I need a witness signature. Send Adrian Marsh to the conference area. Thomas Reed's response copy. Marsh en route, 30 seconds. Adrian Marsh appears from the rear service area in 31 seconds, young, precise, wearing the junior flight attendant uniform with the specific ease of someone who is accustomed to wearing things that are not entirely his own identity. He signs the bottom of Diana's 4-page account as witness dates. It prints his full name in the block letters of someone who has been told at some point in his professional training that printed names on legal documents are preferable to signatures that cannot be read. I photograph all 4 pages with the encrypted device and send them to Marcus in 3 separate compressed files. Marcus responds in 40 seconds, received. All 3 files confirmed, adding to evidentiary package. This is the chain of evidence on the compound. We now have sourcing delivery instruction and intent, all from a direct participant. Catherine, this is sufficient for criminal charges on Stella independent of everything else. Prosecutors will not need to work hard. Leo compound evidence received at my end. FBI field office has been notified. Special agent handling the counterfiling has been updated with the new material. Diana Cole's cooperation is on record. A pause of 3 seconds. Mom. Marcus just confirmed Victor hasn't moved from the Obsidian. Stella is still in Nassau. They don't know it's over yet. I look out the window. The cloud layer is fully broken now. Blue sky above the dark Atlantic, 3 miles below the first pale line of the European coast, visible at the edge of the horizon. Portugal, or the edge of it, the westernmost point of a continent that has no idea what is happening at 35,000 feet above its ocean. How long until Zurich and type? Leo 3 hours 12 minutes. Inspector Kessler's team is staged at Cloten. Swiss federal warrant has been signed. Nassau police have a parallel warrant for the Obsidian. They're waiting on my signal. FBI Manhattan is coordinating with Nassau for Victor's detention. Another pause. We're ready, Mom. All of it. Every piece. Say the word. I set the device down. I look at the whiskey glass still sitting at 6 inches from my right hand, still full, still entirely still. 2 fingers of amber, a synthetic cardiac alkaloid in a 60 milliliter solution, a blueprint that Julian Vance spent 20 years building, and that Stella spent 6 months executing, and that Diana Cole spent 6 weeks carrying, and that has been sitting on this conference table untouched for the past hour and 40 minutes. I pick up the glass. I carry it to the galley and pour it into the sink. Then I come back to the conference table and I type to Leo. Tell Inspector Kessler we're coming. Tell Marcus to be ready. Tell Thomas Reed to stand down to passive monitoring. Diana is cooperating and the aircraft is secure. I pause before the last line. Then I type, it's time to land. Leo's response arrives in 7 seconds. Not an acknowledgement, not a confirmation, not a tactical update, just 4 words in the spare, precise language of a man who learned to say exactly what he means from a father who never wasted a word. I'm proud of you. I sit with that for a moment. Then I fold my hands on the conference table and watch the European coastline grow from a pale line into something solid and real and approaching. And I think about Thomas at the drafting table with his architectural hand and his load-bearing logic and his certainty that the most important move is the one you make before your opponent realizes the game has already begun. We began, I think, a long time ago. Leo sends the counterfiling at 11:03. I know the exact moment it lands at the FBI field office in Manhattan, because my encrypted device produces a single vibration, not a message, not a notification, but a specific pulse pattern. Leo programmed into the system 18 months ago to mean the architecture is complete. 1 long, 2 short. The signal of a structure that has finished bearing its load and is ready to be inspected. I press the device once to acknowledge. Outside the window, the European coastline has resolved from a pale suggestion into something specific. I can see the texture of land now, the dark geometry of coastline against water, the particular way the Atlantic ends and the continent begins. 2 hours and 40 minutes to Zurich. Inspector Kessler and his team are staged at Cloten. The warrants are signed. Everything that needed to be built has been built. I think about what Leo built. He told me with the insurance writer. November 2004, a beneficiary amendment on Thomas's personal life policy, a notary in Miami, a third name in the client log connected to a service department in Coral Gables, traced to Julian Vance's property management architecture. Leo was 23 when he found it working transactional law at a firm on Park Avenue, pulling founding documents for a restructuring that had nothing to do with any of this. He found it by accident and understood it immediately, which is the particular quality of a mind trained by Thomas, the ability to recognize a load-bearing anomaly in a structure that was designed to look unremarkable. He said nothing. He filed what he found in a private archive and continued working, and for 11 years he built the case the way Thomas built structures, from the foundation up each layer confirmed, before the next was placed, nothing added, until what was beneath it could bear the weight. The brake line incident in April gave him the trigger he needed. Not because it was new information Leo had suspected the shape of what was coming for years, but because it was evidence of present intent, which is a different legal category from evidence of historical action, and which changed the nature of what he was building from a retrospective account into an active prevention. He activated Team Shadow in May. Thomas Reed First, a former federal investigator Leo had worked with on a corporate security matter 3 years earlier, a man who understood the difference between following instructions and understanding the architecture of why the instructions mattered. Adrian Marsh, through Reed's network. Cecilia Grant, through a separate channel. A pilot Leo had known since his early 20s, the daughter of a woman who had worked for Thomas in the original Atheris engineering division, and who had, Leo told me, grown up understanding that the Hargrove name was connected to a specific quality of work and a specific quality of loyalty. Daniel Sousa remotely tracking communications from a secured location in New York that Leo had established for this purpose, monitoring every digital channel connected to the Vance Meridian architecture for the past 3 months. 4 people, positioned like load-bearing elements, each one carrying exactly the weight assigned to them, and no more because Leo understood, because Thomas taught him that overloading a single point is how structures fail. My device vibrates. Leo counterfiling confirmed received. FBI special agents handling the case has reviewed the primary submission and the Diana Cole supplemental. He is treating this as a priority federal matter. Julian's frame-up filing against me has been formally designated as fraudulent. That designation is now on record. A pause. Julian's attorneys in Manhattan attempted to file an emergency injunction 40 minutes ago to freeze the counterfiling process. The injunction was denied. The judge cited insufficient standing. I read this twice. Insufficient standing. Julian Vance, who has spent 20 years building an architecture designed to dismantle everything Thomas and I constructed, has been told by a federal judge that he does not have sufficient standing to stop what is happening to him. There is a particular satisfaction in this that I allow myself to feel fully without apology for approximately 4 seconds. Then I move on because satisfaction is not the same as completion, and we are not yet complete. Greg Simmons, I type. Status. Leo full cooperation. Marcus has his signed disclosure, 14 pages, covering his role in the Quantum Assurance Group, filing the forged signature on the policy application, and his financial relationship with Vance Meridian. He named 2 additional individuals in the insurance architecture. I wasn't aware of Marcus as running them now. Simmons has been formally retained as a cooperating witness. His attorney negotiated a reduced charge agreement contingent on complete disclosure, which Marcus says is the correct outcome, given his level of culpability relative to Julian and Stella. Raymond Holt, the first type. Leo Holt's more complicated. He retained counsel this morning, a criminal defense firm in Miami that Julian Vance has used before. His attorney has indicated he will not cooperate voluntarily. Marcus says we don't need him to. Diana's testimony. Simmons's disclosure and the financial reconstruction are sufficient to establish the fraudulent medical record without Holt's cooperation. He will be charged regardless. His attorney knows this. Marcus expects a cooperation offer from Holt's side within 48 hours once the formal charges are filed and the weight of the evidence becomes apparent. I look out the window. The land below is more defined now. I can see roads, the geometry of fields, the particular organization of a European landscape that has been inhabited for long enough that even its agriculture looks intentional. We are perhaps 2 hours from Zurich. The clouds are entirely gone. The sky is the specific blue of high altitude in October, clear and cold and without ambiguity. Julian type. What do we have on his direct involvement in Thomas's death? A longer pause this time. 14 seconds Leo thinking, not Leo not knowing. The payment record is clean, he writes. Service completion Hargrove Protocol dated January 28, 2005 from the Vance Meridian predecessor entity to the Nassau Medical Logistics firm. Marcus has the full transaction chain, 7 layers of shell entities, each one documented. The forensic accountant Marcus retained confirms it is unambiguous in its direction. The money moved from Julian's controlled entity to a firm that had no legitimate commercial relationship with Vance Meridian and whose only Nassau-registered client in January 2005 was a private medical practice that was dissolved 6 months after Thomas died. Another pause. The physician who ran that practice, the one who signed Thomas's death certificate, died in 2009. Natural causes documented. But Marcus found something in the probate records of his estate, a letter held by his estate attorney marked not to be opened until 10 years after his death. His estate attorney opened it in 2019. He didn't know what to do with it, so he filed it in his own records and did nothing. My hands are very still on the table. Marcus found the letter. Leo continued. It's a confession. Partial, the physician didn't name Julian Vance directly. He used initials. JV. He described being approached in December 2004, being paid to administer a compound during a house call, and being told that the patient's death would be attributed to natural cardiac failure. He wrote that he had carried it for 14 years and could not die without leaving a record. He wrote that he was sorry. A pause. Mom. We have it. Full chain. Payment record dead. Physician's confession financial architecture. Thomas's journal, the December 2004 email fragments. Marcus says any competent prosecutor will treat this as a first-degree murder case. I sit with this for a long moment. Thomas died on a Tuesday morning in January while I was in the East Study reviewing quarterly projections. A physician came to the house, a house call which I remember thinking at the time was unusual, but which I attributed to Thomas's preference for privacy in medical matters. I was in the East studying. Leo was at school. Thomas was alone in the upstairs hallway. A physician came to the house, and I was in the East study 30 feet away reviewing quarterly projections while the man who built Etheris with me and taught our son to play chess and chose a watch that needed winding. So I would never forget that some things require attention, while that man was being killed by someone Julian Vance paid to be there. I close my eyes for 3 seconds. Then I open them and I pick up the device and I type, "Tell Marcus to prepare the full murder filing." All of it. Thomas, the compound, the physician, the payment record, the confession, the email fragments, the journal, everything. I want Julian Vance charged with the murder of Thomas Hargrove before this week is over. Leo's response already drafted. Marcus was waiting for your instruction. 4 seconds. Then he never stopped working on it. Not for 19 years. He just needed you to be ready. I look at the European landscape below. The fields, the roads, the careful geometry of a continent that has been building things for a very long time. I'm ready, I type. I call Victor first. This is a deliberate choice. Victor is the one I married. Victor is the one who sat across from me at dinner for 7 years and asked about my day and poured my wine and slept in the room across the hall from the room where Thomas's locked door has been closed for 19 years. Victor is the one whose name I chose to take into the legal structure of my life. The one whose presence in December 2004 in a Manhattan ballroom with Julian Vance's planted operative I did not know about until 48 hours ago. The one whose calculation about me began 12 years before I ever considered him as anything other than a mid-level aviation finance consultant retained for a single project. I call Victor because he is the one I need to hear. Not because I need him to confirm anything. I have the confirmation 43 pages of it, plus a physician's confession and a 4-page written account from a flight attendant who is currently sitting in the rear service area, composing a formal statement for Marcus's legal team. I call Victor because I have spent 7 years in a marriage that was constructed on a foundation I did not know was false. And before the formal machinery of justice takes over and reduces everything to charges and filings and procedural language, I want one moment of plain truth between two people in a conversation that has no lawyers present. The line connects on the 3rd ring. Catherine. His voice is careful. Victor's voice is always careful. It is one of the things I initially mistook for thoughtfulness, the particular precision of a man who weighs his words before he commits them. I understand now that the precision was not thoughtfulness. It was management. Victor, I say, I'm going to tell you what I know, and then I'm going to tell you what happens next. I need you to listen to both. A silence. Outside the window, the European coastline is 40 minutes behind us now. We are over the Alps. I can see the peaks below white and absolute the specific grandeur of geology that has no interest in human arrangements. I know about Vance Meridian Holdings, I say. I know about the Quantum Assurance Group policy and the $5 billion beneficiary structure and Greg Simmons' role in the application. I know about Raymond Holt and the psychiatric file he created in August and the suicidal ideation notation and the risk assessment designed to establish a narrative for my death at altitude. I pause. I know about December 2004. I know about Elaine Marsh and the Children's Hospital benefit and your meeting with Julian Vance's operative 6 weeks before Thomas died. I know about the brake line incident in April, the contractor traced to your employment network, the Fort Lauderdale staffing firm connected to Vance Meridian. Victor says nothing. The line is completely silent, not the silence of a bad connection, but the silence of a person whose interior architecture is undergoing rapid and irreversible structural reassessment. I know about Thomas, I say. The silence changes. It is the same absence of sound, but its quality shifts the way the atmosphere in a room shifts when something enters it that cannot be taken back. The payment record. I continue. January 28, 2005. Service completion Hargrove Protocol. The physician's confession letter opened in 2019, naming JV by initials. The email fragments from November and December 2004 connecting Julian's architecture to a planned outcome within a specific timeline. Thomas's journal, 4 pages on the acquisition meeting, 1 final entry 6 days before he died. I pause. I know all of it, Victor. The full shape of it, 20 years of it. Another silence. When Victor finally speaks, his voice has lost its careful management, not broken but altered the way a structure sounds different, when the load it was designed to carry has been removed, and what remains is just the frame. How long have you known? He asks. It is, I note, the same question Victoria asked in the version of this story I have been rewriting in my mind since 30,000 feet above the Atlantic. How long have you known the first question of a person whose primary concern is no longer the plan, but their own exposure within it? Long enough, I say. Here is what happens next. Within the next 2 hours, the Nassau police will execute a warrant at the Obsidian. You will be detained and transported to the Nassau Central Police Station, where Marcus Webb will be present as the representative of my legal interests. FBI agents in Manhattan are coordinating that process now. You will be charged with conspiracy to commit murder insurance fraud and accessory to the murder of Thomas Hargrove. Julian Vance will be charged with first-degree murder. Stella will be charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and insurance fraud. Diana Cole is cooperating as a witness. Greg Simmons is cooperating as a witness. Raymond Holt will cooperate within 48 hours. I pause. The Alps are fully visible below immense white permanent. Atheris is safe, I say. Leo assumes interim operational authority effective immediately. Project 5 K13 continues. The company Thomas and I built will not be touched by any of this because Leo and I have made certain of that, and because the people who tried to take it underestimated what it means to build something with someone you love, and then spend 19 years making sure it survives them. Victor is quiet for a long time. When he speaks, his voice is very low. Catherine, don't, I say, not unkindly. With the same finality I used with Diana Cole, the finality of a person who has already heard every version of what comes next and has no interest in any of them. There is nothing you can say in this conversation that changes any of what I've just told you. There is nothing that explains it. or contextualizes it, or reduces its weight. I married you in good faith, Victor, and that good faith was a resource you extracted systematically over 7 years, while the man who arranged my first husband's murder remained your partner and your architect. I pause. We are done. I ended the call. I sit for a moment with the phone in my hand. The encrypted device is quiet. Leo is monitoring. I know, but he is giving me this space because Leo has always known when I need space and when I need company. And what I need right now is 30 seconds of something that is not a tactical update or an evidentiary confirmation or a legal status report. I look at the watch, the Patek Philippe, hand-wound white gold, the anniversary gift from a man who understood that some things require your attention to keep running. I wind it. A small deliberate rotation, the specific resistance of a movement that needs the intervention of a human hand to continue functioning. Thomas chose it for exactly this reason. A watch that needs you. I need you too, I think, in the direction of a November morning in 2005 in a grave in Connecticut and a locked room at the Obsidian that holds a green leather journal and 31 pages of a structural engineer's careful hand. Then I call Stella. She answers in 4 rings. Her voice is composed the pale gray composure of Julian Vance's daughter, the composure of someone who has been performing a role for 6 months and has not yet received the information that the performance is over. Catherine, she says. The word is shaped with the specific neutrality of someone who has been practicing how to say it. The compound has been identified, I say. Diana Cole has provided a 4-page written account naming you as the architect. The app communications are documented. The pharmaceutical vial and courier delivery are on record. Greg Simmons has disclosed his role in the insurance architecture and named your father as the primary. Raymond Holt will cooperate within 48 hours. I pause. The Nassau police have a warrant. They are 22 minutes from your current location. A silence. Then very quietly, you knew. Yes, on the plane. Before the plane. I say, Leo has known me for 3 months. The difference between Leo and your father is that Leo builds things to last. Julian builds things to take. Those are not equivalent skills, and this is the outcome of that difference. Stella is silent for a long moment. When she speaks again, her voice has shifted from composure into something rawer, something that I think might be the first entirely genuine thing I have heard from her in 6 years of proximity. He told me it was the only way, that the company would have gone to Leo eventually and we would have had nothing. He said, I know what he said, I say quietly. He told your mother something similar, I imagine. Before she died in a car accident in 2008. I let that land. Julian Vance tells people what they need to hear in order to make them useful. You were useful to him. I'm sorry that is the most accurate description of your place in this. She has nothing to say to this. I did not expect her to. The warrant is 19 minutes away. I say, I would suggest you use the time to call an attorney. I ended the call. My encrypted device vibrates immediately. Leo Both calls monitored by Thomas Reed per protocol 2 communications clause. Recordings secured. Marcus has been notified. Catherine Victor has not attempted to leave the Obsidian. Stella has just placed a call to a number Marcus identifies as a Miami defense firm. A pause. They're not running. They know it's over. I look out the window. The Alps are behind us now. The terrain below is flatter, more ordered, the specific geometry of Central European landscape, fields and roads, and the quiet infrastructure of a continent going about its ordinary business on an October afternoon. Zurich is 1 hour and 12 minutes away. I type to Leo, tell Inspector Kessler we're on approach. Tell Marcus to be ready for the Nassau coordination. Tell Thomas Reed to stand down to passive, the aircraft is secure, and the calls are complete. I pause before the last line. Then I type, tell me about Thomas's last journal entry, the one he wrote for me. I want to know what it says before I land. Leo's response arrives in 11 seconds. Are you sure you want it now? It can wait until Eleanor's room. I look at the watch on my wrist, the movement that requires a human hand to keep running. I'm sure I type. Tell me now. Leo takes 40 seconds to respond. I count them. Not impatiently. Patience is not the issue, but with the specific awareness of someone who understands that 40 seconds of silence from Leo means he is choosing language with the particular care that the next thing requires. Leo does not pause for effect. He pauses because precision matters to him the way it mattered to Thomas, and some things resist precision, and those are the things that take him longest to say. The device vibrates. He wrote it on January 14th, 2005, 3 days before he died. It's the last entry in the journal, 2 pages, the second half of the final page left blank. He wrote it in the morning before 8 because the handwriting is cleaner than his evening entries. You know how his hand got looser after dinner. I do know. Thomas wrote better before noon. After dinner, his letters softened the architectural precision, giving way to something warmer and less controlled, the handwriting of a man who had finished the day's precision work and was allowing himself to simply exist for a few hours. I used to read his evening notes and think they looked like a different man wrote them. I loved both versions. He wrote Catherine. I have been trying to solve this before telling you because you know how I am, and because I did not want to hand you a problem, I could not also hand you a solution for. I have not found the solution yet. I am writing this because I have begun to consider, with the seriousness the possibility deserves, that I may not get the chance. If you are reading this, then Leo found the journal, which means Leo was looking, which means Leo understood before I told him that something was wrong, which means he is more like you than either of us has given him credit for, and you should tell him I said so. I need you to know 3 things. The first Aetheris is yours. It was always yours. I was the structure, and you were the vision, and structures exist to hold visions up, not to replace them. Whatever they are trying to take, they cannot take what you built, because what you built lives in a place they cannot reach. The second Leo is going to be extraordinary. He already is. He just doesn't know it yet, and it will take him a few more years to find out. And when he does, I need you to be there to see it. Stay, Catherine. Whatever happens, stay. The third. The watch needs winding. I know you know. I'm telling you anyway because some things are worth saying even when they don't need to be said. I love you. I have loved you since the morning you walked into the Park Avenue office in 1986 and told me my structural calculations were elegant, but my vision was limited, and I knew in the following 30 seconds that you were the most correct and most infuriating person I had ever met, and that I was going to spend the rest of my life being grateful for both. Whatever the rest of my life turns out to be, it was enough. You were enough. You were more than enough. Thomas. I do not move for a long time after I finish reading. The device is in my hand, face up, Leo's message still on the screen. Outside the window, the terrain below has shifted again, more urban now, the organized sprawl of the Swiss Mittelland roads and towns, and the specific infrastructure of a small country that has spent centuries building things carefully and keeping them. Zurich is 40 minutes away. I think about Thomas in the e-study on January 14th, 2005, before 8 in the morning, writing 2 pages in his cleaner morning hand, while the January light came through the window, and somewhere in the house, a physician was preparing, and Thomas did not know that, and I was 30 feet away reviewing quarterly projections, and I did not know that either, and neither of us knew. And that not knowing is the thing I have carried for 19 years, in the particular way that you carry something you cannot set down. Not in your hands, but in your body, in the weight of ordinary mornings that are nothing like that morning, and yet are never entirely separate from it. Whatever the rest of my life turns out to be, it was enough. I picked up the device. I typed to Leo, "Thank you for keeping it. Thank you for finding it." A pause. Then he was right about you. He knew before you did. Leo's response takes 22 seconds. When it arrives, it is 3 words. I know, Mom. Oh. At 12:41, Thomas Reed sends a brief operational update through the protocol, 2-channel aircraft secure. Diana Cole in rear service area formal statement complete 41 pages transmitted to Marcus at 12:38. Adrian Marsh confirms the rear cabin is clear. Cecilia Grant reports final approach clearance received from Zurich Cloten. Estimated touchdown 13:04 local, I acknowledge with a single press. At 12:53, Marcus calls on the standard encrypted line. His voice carries the specific quality of a man who has been working without pause for 7 hours and has arrived at the point where the work is done and what remains is delivery. Nassau police executed the warrant at the Obsidian at 12:47 local time. He says, Victor Hargrove is in custody. He did not resist. He made no statement. A pause. Stella was detained at her Nassau apartment at 12:51. Her attorney was present, the Miami firm she contacted after your call. She also made no statement. Another pause, the kind Marcus uses when the next item requires separate framing. Julian Vance was taken into federal custody in New York at 12:49. FBI Field Office Manhattan coordinated with the Nassau warrant timing. His attorneys were present and filed an immediate bail application. The application was denied. The judge cited flight risk and the severity of the charges. A beat. Catherine. The murder charge on Thomas the judge reviewed the preliminary filing and designated it a priority matter. Julian Vance is being held without bail on a charge of first-degree murder. The charge names Thomas Edward Hargrove deceased. January 17, 2005. Thomas Edward Hargrove. 19 years. A death certificate that said cardiac failure. A Tuesday morning in January, a physician who came to the house and left and dissolved his practice 6 months later and carried on what he had done for 14 years, and then wrote 2 pages in a letter he sealed and marked not to be opened for 10 years because he could not die without leaving a record. Julian Vance held without bail, charged with the murder of Thomas Edward Hargrove. Thank you, Marcus, I say. My voice is steady. It is always steady. But beneath the steadiness, something that has been under pressure for 19 years releases quietly without drama, the way a structural load transfers when the correct support is finally placed beneath it. There's one more thing, Marcus says. Leo asked me to tell you directly, rather than through the device. He said you'd want to hear it from a voice, not a screen. A pause. He found something in Eleanor's room at the Obsidian, something behind the wall panel near the drafting desk separate from the journal. He wants to show you Thursday when you're back, he said, and I'm quoting exactly, because Leo was precise about the wording. Tell her it's something Thomas left for both of us. Not just her, for both of us. I close my eyes. For both of us. Thomas in that locked room in the years before January 2005, leaving something behind for a son who was 11 years old and a wife who was 39, and who would both spend the next 19 years building and protecting and waiting without entirely knowing what they were waiting for both of us. Tell Leo I'll be there Thursday, I say. Ether 1 touches down at Zurich Cloten at 13:07, 3 minutes behind the projected time, which Thomas would have noted with mild professional dissatisfaction, and I note with the specific gratitude of a woman who is still alive to note anything at all. Inspector Gerhard Kessler is at the air stairs with 2 members of his federal coordination team. He is 61 trim with the particular economy of movement that belongs to people who have spent decades in the business of arriving at the right place, at the right time, with the right preparation. He extends his hand as I descend the stairs into the October air. Mrs. Hargrove, he says, Inspector Kessler, everything is in order. Thank you, Inspector, I say. I step onto the tarmac. The October air is cold and clean, Swiss Air mountain adjacent, the specific sharpness of altitude that I have always found clarifying. Above me, the sky is the same clear blue it was at 35,000 feet, unchanged by descent, indifferent to arrival. My device vibrates. Leo, you landed. How do you feel? I stand on the Zurich tarmac with Inspector Kessler beside me, and the Alps visible at the edge of the horizon, and the October sky overhead, and Thomas's watch on my wrist wound, running, keeping the time it was designed to keep, for as long as a human hand remembers to attend to it. I type back, like something that has been falling for a very long time has finally found the floor. Thursday arrived with the quiet ordinariness that follows extraordinary days. I landed in Nassau at 11 in the morning, 3 days after the confrontation in Zurich. The October air was warm and generous, entirely indifferent to the psychological weight I carried. At the airfield, the Rezvani waited with Samuel, a driver of 14 years, whose reliability had become structural to my life. He welcomed me home to the Obsidian, now a house without Victor or Stella. It was the house as it had been before the 7-year infiltration by Julian Vance's Architecture of Deceit. The house Thomas and I built in 1991 from volcanic glass and conviction. Leo was already there. I saw him from the motor court standing at the east entrance with 2 coffee cups. At 34, he possessed Thomas's hands and stillness, but his resolve was entirely his own. I had watched that jawline set since he was 9 years old, trying to hold our world together. He handed me the cooler of the 2 coffees without a word. We stood in the morning light, 2 people who had survived a betrayal that didn't yet have a name, communicating in the precise wordless vocabulary we had developed over decades. We both said we were better, and in our shorthand that was sufficient. The house was silent. I had given the staff the day off to ensure our privacy. The east sitting room was exactly as it was, minus Stella's presence, and the cup of poisoned coffee she had poured me Tuesday morning. We walked to the north corridor, stopping before a dark wood door. I held the key Leo had sent me in Zurich. Thomas hadn't locked this door against intruders, but against time to preserve the room exactly as it was when he left it. The lock turned on the first try. The scent hit me, first jasmine cedar, and the specific preserved atmosphere of a person who has been gone for 19 years. It was Thomas's study. The drafting table held his tools, a parallel rule compasses a mechanical pencil. Architectural drawings from 1991 remained pinned to the corkboard. Engineering texts stood beside volumes of poetry, a combination Thomas believed essential for understanding structural tension. A photograph on the desk showed us in 1988, young and uncertain. Leo moved to a flush-mounted wall panel. He pressed 2 points simultaneously, and the panel released with a soft mechanical click. Inside the cavity was the green leather journal and a flat mahogany box with a brass clasp. On the lid, in Thomas's clean architectural hand, were 2 words, "For both." Leo set the box on the drafting table. In the amber light of the good hour, I opened it. Inside was a letter on original 1988 Etheris letterhead, a small, precise structural diagram, and a photograph I had never seen Thomas guiding a 4-year-old Leo's hand across a piece of paper at this very drafting table. Leo made a sound, a breath of recognition of a love he had always felt but never seen documented. I put my arm around him. I unfolded the letter. Thomas's handwriting was clean and weight-bearing. Catherine and Leo. If you are both reading this, then the thing I was worried about happened, and you found each other on the other side of it. The drawing in this box is the original structural concept for a propulsion architecture I intended to propose in 2005, the foundation of Project 5K13. I'm leaving it to both of you because it needs 2 people to finish it. One who understands the vision and one who understands the structure. Leo. I know you have been protecting your mother longer than she knows. I am sorry I left before I could stand beside you. You are the best thing I ever built. Catherine. The watch needs winding. Some things are worth saying even when they don't need to be said. Finish the project. It was always meant to be finished. Thomas. The room held the silence for a long moment, filled with the scent of cedar and the weight of 19 years. Leo carefully refolded the letter and replaced it in the box with the photograph and the drawing. He closed the clasp with the precision of a man performing a sacred act. He looked at me and said what needed to be said. We should finish it. Yes, I replied. We should. Leo picked up the box and we walked out of the study together. We stepped into the house built of volcanic glass, transparent yet impenetrable. Behind us, for the first time in nearly 2 decades, the door to Thomas's study stood wide open. We sit at the kitchen table for an hour before we open the letter again. This is not avoidance. It is the specific care that certain things deserve. Some documents should not be read in the middle of emotional velocity, but in the stillness that follows it when there is enough internal room to receive what is being offered without distortion. Thomas understood this. He was a man who never read important documents, standing up believing that the weight of the information required a stable foundation. Leo makes fresh coffee. I watch him move through the kitchen with Thomas's hands and Thomas's deliberateness, the specific economy of a person who does not perform tasks but simply fulfills them without commentary or self-consciousness. He sets the cup in front of me without asking how I take it. He is known for 34 years. Outside the window, the Atlantic is visible flat and silver. Thomas loved this view, often saying the ocean was the most useful thing to look at when a problem seemed larger than its actual dimensions. It established scale, and scale was the beginning of accurate assessment. The problem, I think, has finally found its correct scale. Everything that requires resolution is resolved or in motion. The people who needed to be stopped have been stopped. The evidence that needed to be secured is secured. What remains is smaller and larger, simultaneously smaller in its urgency, larger in its permanence. What remains is us. When the coffee is finished, Leo opens the mahogany box on the kitchen table. He lifts the letter out first and sets it in the space between us, the space that belongs to both of us as Thomas intended when he wrote, "For both," on the lid. Then the photograph. Then the structural drawing which Leo unfolds with the architectural gesture of someone trained to treat drawings as documents rather than pictures. I look at the drawing. It is 6 inches square precise pencil on cartridge paper. Thomas's title block in the corner. Project 5 K13. Primary Propulsion Architecture. Conceptual Framework T.E. Hargrove. October 2004. That was 3 months before he died. The same month, the propulsion sequencing he had chased for 14 months finally resolved. He had drawn it, locked it in this box, and sealed it behind a wall panel, while simultaneously watching Julian Vance and documenting the threat in his journal. He understood the structural, load-bearing stress of his life before the visible signs appeared. He solved the thing he most wanted to solve and left it for us. The sequencing is here, Leo says, his finger tracing a line without touching the paper. The piece that makes 5K13 viable for sustained orbital insertion without chemical stage dependency. Mom, this is 20 years ahead of the current aerospace framework. If we build the development program around this, we will, I say. Leo looks at me. It will take years and significant capital restructuring. The budget currently assumes we license external architecture. Then we restructure, I say. That is what we do, Leo. We build things. Your father solved this problem in the last 3 months of his life while someone was trying to kill him, and he drew it in pencil on a 6-inch piece of paper. The least we can do is finish it. A shift occurs in Leo's face, the expression he makes when something he has been holding carefully finally settles into its correct position. He knew, Leo says quietly. He knew he might not get to present it, so he drew it and trusted that we would find it. He trusted that you would find it, I corrected him. He wrote in the journal that Leo will find it, because Leo has always understood that the things worth keeping are the things that are hidden with care. Leo looks at the photograph, the 4-year-old version of himself at the drafting table, with Thomas's hand guiding his. He doesn't remember the photo being taken, but he remembers the table, the step stool, and his father's hand. Thomas understood that the moments worth preserving were the ordinary ones, not the celebrations, but a Tuesday morning learning to hold a pencil correctly. Those moments feel insignificant while they are happening and become everything afterward. I read the letter again, finish the project. It was always meant to be finished. We stay in the kitchen until 2 in the afternoon discussing the trial timeline, the upcoming Etheris board meeting, and the restructuring of the 5K13 development program. We talk about the practical infrastructure of a house that is finally free of the people who were inside it for the wrong reasons. We talk about Thomas, not the man in the forensic reports or the journals, but the Thomas who made coffee before 8, kept poetry on his engineering shelves, and chose a watch that needed winding. Thomas who taught a child to stand on a step stool. At 2:15, Leo stands to leave for his flight to New York. The Etheris board has been informed of the co-chairmanship transition, and matters require his presence. He carries the mahogany box under his arm. I have told him to keep it. The photograph belongs with him, and the structural drawing belongs in the development archive where it will be built by the team that will realize Thomas's solution. At the east entrance, he stops. He looks at me for a moment with Thomas's eyes, that specific quality of attention that makes a person feel like the most comprehensible thing in the room. "Mom," he says. "He was right. About you." A pause. More than enough. Preliminary hearings begin in January. Marcus prepares me with the specific honesty of a man who understands I prefer accurate information to comfortable information. We meet in his Midtown office on a gray Thursday, and he walks me through the evidentiary architecture from the foundation, up much like Thomas used to explain structural drawings. The murder charge against Julian Vance proceeds separately. The federal judge assigned has 30 years on the bench and a complete intolerance for procedural manipulation. All 4 preliminary motions filed by Julian's attorneys are denied. The evidence is immutable payment records, a physician's confession email fragments Thomas's journal, and a financial chain through 7 shell entities. Most damaging is a deceased physician's letter sealed for 10 years and opened in 2019, naming J.V. Julian Vance sits at the defense table in a dark suit, saying nothing that helps him. Parallel proceedings for conspiracy and fraud against Victor, Stella, and others run through the spring. Victor pleads guilty in March, negotiating a reduced sentence of 14 years in exchange for full cooperation. Stella contests the charges until May, but the precise account provided by Diana Cole, backed by forensic evidence and app communications, forces her to accept a plea of 11 years. I am present for her brief formal statement of remorse. I listen, but do not respond. Raymond Holt cooperates fully within 48 hours, providing clear evidence of documentary fraud regarding the fabricated psychiatric file. He receives 5 years. Greg Simmons receives 3 years, and Diana Cole receives a suspended sentence due to her cooperation and the coercive circumstances of her recruitment. Julian Vance goes to trial in September. After 11 days of testimony, the jury deliberates for 4 hours and returns a unanimous verdict. I'm in the courtroom when it is read. Leo is beside me, his presence as structural as it was at Thomas's funeral. When the foreman reads, "First-degree murder, Thomas Edward Hargrove, deceased January 17, 2005. The room is quiet. I do not cry. What I feel is the specific quality of a structural load being correctly distributed, of a thing held at an angle for 19 years, finally settling at a level." Leo takes my hand, and I let him. The Etheris board meeting follows in November. On the 43rd floor, Leo presents the 5K13 propulsion architecture, based on Thomas's drawings and 18 months of engineering analysis. The board approves the restructured program unanimously. Afterward, Leo shows me the new organizational chart. At the top, side by side, Catherine Hargrove executive chair, Leo Hargrove co-chair. Below the founding statement, Thomas wrote in 1988, "Remains unchanged, built to last." I write the letter on a Sunday morning in December. The obsidian is quiet, the house having found its correct register again. Leo flies in from New York this afternoon, leaving the morning to me. I sit at Thomas's working desk in the East Study, using the Mont Blanc pen he left there the morning he died. It fits my hand, perfectly chosen by someone who knew me well. I write, "Thomas, it is December 2024. Julian Vance was convicted of your murder in September. I was there, and Leo was beside me. The architecture Julian built has been dismantled. Aetheris is safe. Leo is co-chair in Project 5. K13 is in active development based on the propulsion drawing you hid in the mahogany box. Leo spent 11 years building this casework that looks like patience, but is in truth, love. He is more like us than he knows. I wear the watch and wind it every morning. Some days it's a small act, others the most significant thing I do. The study door is open now. I sit in your chair and remember your voice from the morning you solved the sequencing. We are finishing the project. It was always meant to be finished. With everything, Catherine. I fold the letter but do not seal it. There is nowhere to send it. I sit for a moment with the ocean visible through the window. The same silver indifference that reduces problems to their correct dimensions. The front door opens. I hear Samuel's voice. Then Leo's calling my name through the house, not with the precision of a protocol, but with the simple clarity of someone who has arrived home. I answer. Looking back on this journey, I've realized that the most brutal form of retaliation isn't violence, it is the truth. I spent my entire life building an empire only to leave the foundation vulnerable to those closest to me. Don't be like me. Never let busyness or blind faith obscure the cracks forming within your own home. My life became a tragic series of family betrayal, where those I loved most were the ones setting the deadliest traps. But I believe that no matter how deep the scheme, God has a righteous eye that sees through every shadow of deceit. When the truth finally surfaced, my plan for family revenge was about more than just punishment. It was about reclaiming justice for Thomas and securing a future for Leo. My perspective is simple. Never underestimate the strength of a woman protecting her husband's legacy. Do not let family betrayal break you. Let it sharpen you. A well-executed plan for family revenge is the only way to end the insatiable greed of your enemies. Remember, the most dangerous foe is the one sitting at your dinner table, and the pain of family betrayal will only make you more formidable in the final battle for family revenge.